At the start of the 7th generation of gaming, military-style shooters were a dime a dozen. Thanks to the success of titles like Call of Duty and Medal of Honor, every major studio wanted to jump in on the hype. With the ongoing wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, Western gamers were exposed to modern military warfare more than ever. It was under these circumstances that a small studio based in New York City would partner with THQ to present their own variation of warfare, with Frontlines, Fuel of War. Everything has a story. This is the story of Frontlines, Fuel of War. In this video, we'll be taking a look at the development, release, and aftermath of Kaos Studios' debut game. We'll also be discussing the larger problems revolving around Frontlines publisher THQ, as they struggled to change their image from publishing primarily licensed titles to creating original intellectual properties. During the late 90s and early 2000s, the modding community for PC games had grown from a small niche to a full-blown movement. After exploding in popularity with 1993's Doom, the modding for first-person shooters led to many innovations and creative designs for some of the most popular PC games of all time. This included the popular World War II shooter Battlefield 1942. Developed by Digital Illusions Creative Entertainment, or as they're better known, DICE, and published by EA, the title was a massive hit with both critics and fans. But for many fans, the fun didn't stop with the multiplayer mayhem available in the base game. Many mods were made for Battlefield 1942, including the very popular Desert Combat mod created by Trauma Studios, a team of 12 developers spread throughout the world led by Frank DeLise. Rather than follow the events of the Second World War, Desert Combat offered a modern take on warfare, taking inspiration from modern conflicts in the Middle East. Early versions of the mod released in 2003 and quickly gained popularity. Part of the popularity came from the US invasion into Iraq. The ongoing world events led to the mod being downloaded over 1 million times and earned Trauma Studios plenty of attention. In September 2004, DICE announced that they had purchased Trauma Studios for $500,000. Trauma Studios would be renamed to DICE New York, and the team was hard at work on 2 different projects. One of these projects was assisting in the development of Battlefield 2, the upcoming sequel to Battlefield 1942 that took place in the modern era. Battlefield 2 released in June of 2005 to glowing reviews from critics, but DICE New York wasn't celebrating. Just before release, DICE closed their New York studio, leaving around a dozen developers jobless less than a year after the studio was purchased. To make matters worse, DICE only paid $300,000 of the $500,000 offered originally made to Trauma Studios, leaving around $200,000 unpaid. The employees of Trauma Studios were given the option to join DICE on the main campus in Stockholm, but Frank DeLise had another plan in mind. DeLise shopped himself and his creative team around before making a deal with THQ. In early 2006, Kaos Studios was unveiled to the world, with DeLise as the general manager and THQ being their financial backing. At the time of announcement, Kaos Studios already had 30 employees, and work on their next project was well underway. A few months after Kaos Studios made their debut, their first project was officially revealed. A new, semi-futuristic first-person shooter titled Frontlines, Fuel of War was announced for Xbox 360, PlayStation 3, and PC, with an intended release date of holiday 2007. Frontlines didn't stray too far from Kaos' roots. The first-person shooter would feature a large-scale multiplayer mode and engaging single-player campaign. Frontlines offered a new take on the growing modern military shooter genre by taking place in 2024. Influences from ongoing conflicts in the Middle East inspired this new future scenario. Oil shortages are causing nations to create alliances to go to war in order to obtain what little fuel is left, with the United States and Europe joining forces to create the Western Coalition, and China and Russia forming the Red Star Alliance. Gameplay focused on the front line. During gameplay, the front line would constantly move on the map in accordance with each team's success. For the single-player campaign, this gave players a non-linear map to explore with various objectives to complete. In multiplayer, the front line was used to create tension between opposing teams. Kaos Studios producer Joe Hapler made the remark in an interview with Shack News that you want to push the front line forward, and that gives you more weapons, more equipment. The more territory you have, the more you own. Frontlines joined the rest of THQ's slate of titles at E3 2006 with a new trailer and plenty of buzz. Similar to the Battlefield series of games that Kaos Studios cut their teeth on, Frontlines offered up plenty of vehicles for players to use during combat. Drones were brought into the game to further the chaos on the battlefield, allowing players to cross the front lines with robotics as opposed to their playable characters. Destructible environments were a huge selling point as well, although this would mostly be seen in the single-player campaign rather than multiplayer. For both its multiplayer and single-player, Kaos Studios hoped to create a more squad-based and tactical approach to action. Frontlines offered massive 64-player battles on PC, but for the consoles this would be toned down to just 32. Development for Frontlines was going smoothly, but a number of issues at both Kaos and THQ would push the title away from its intended release window of holiday 2007. In May of 2007, THQ CFO Edward Zinzer announced that Frontlines would be pushed back into early 2008, in part due to the crowded gaming market in late 2007. Internally, developers were running into issues crafting the PlayStation 3 version of the game. Kaos Studios attended multiple events throughout 2007 to show off Frontlines, but the PS3 version of the title was mysteriously missing. In October 2007, THQ announced that the PS3 version of Frontlines would not be released alongside the Xbox 360 or PC releases. Instead, the PS3 version would come sometime later in 2008. In an interview with GameSpot, Frank DeLise clarified why the PS3 version was more difficult to tackle. DeLise stated that the delay was mostly due to the title using the Unreal Engine 3. At the time, Epic Games were still trying to work around the PS3's unique cell processor for game development. PlayStation fans still had something to look forward to, notably the game's use of 6-axis motion controls that were not present in the Xbox 360 or PC versions of the game. Unfortunately, the PlayStation 3 version of the game was not meant to be. In an investor's newsletter released in January 2008, THQ officially canceled the PS3 version of Frontlines, alongside the announcement of various other cancellations and closures. With the PS3 version gone, Kaos Studios focused their efforts entirely on finishing Frontlines for other platforms. Despite these efforts, Frontlines was delayed again in late 2007 for a February 2008 release. With all the setbacks facing Frontlines, Kaos Studios, and THQ over its development, the public finally got a chance to play the title when a demo of the game was released for Xbox Live just a few weeks before the game hit retailers. Frontlines Fuel of War released on PC and Xbox 360 on February 25, 2008 in North America. A European release followed on February 29th, with Australia receiving the game on March 6. A digital version of the PC version of Frontlines was sold through Gamersgate.com starting on March 10, 2008. Reviews for the title were above average. Praise was given to the title's multiplayer mode, which critics favorably compared to the Battlefield series. The single-player campaign was received in a more negative light, with much of the focus being on its short runtime. The Xbox 360 version of Frontlines debuted at number 20 on NPD's best-selling games of February 2008 with an estimated 100,000 copies sold. The PC version saw success as well, when it came in as the 10th best-selling game for PC the next month. Within a year, the title sold over 1 million units, leading Kaos Studios to state that the title was a commercial success. Throughout the rest of 2008, Frontlines received multiple patches, updates, and downloadable content. In June, the Xbox 360 version of the game was updated to allow 50-player matches. This was accompanied by a new map, Boneyard, that could be downloaded free of charge. With 50 players playing together at once, Frontlines set a record for the most simultaneous players in a multiplayer match for Xbox Live. In September, Conqueror Mode was added to the game for free, and 4 new maps were available for purchase for the cost of 800 Microsoft points, or $9.99. In March of 2009, Kaos Studios made moves to expand their company by hiring new positions despite the global recession occurring. These new roles were for their next title, Homefront, which began development after the release of Frontlines. Sadly, Homefront was the last game released by Kaos Studios. Following the release of Homefront in March of 2011, THQ suffered a 26% stock drop, possibly because of Homefront's poor reception. On June 3, 2011, Kaos Studios was closed by THQ. With roughly 70 employees at the time, Kaos's members were transferred to THQ Studios in Montreal to work on a sequel to Homefront. THQ's financial situation wouldn't get better after closing Kaos. In December of 2012, THQ announced that they would file for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. The assets of their company were then sold off to various other media conglomerates, studios, and publishers. Today, Frontlines Fuel of War is available for digital download through services like Xbox Live and Steam. The rights to the game are owned by THQ Nordic, formerly known as Nordic Games. In April 2013, Nordic Games bought the rights to roughly 150 of THQ's titles. Among these titles was Frontlines. As it stands, Frontlines seems to be nothing more than a small footnote from the 7th generation of gaming. There have been no talks of sequels or remasters of the title. Its modern-day war setting did little to set it apart from the other notable first-person shooters of the time, like Halo 3, Call of Duty 4, and BioShock. Its legacy is intrinsically tied to that of Chaos Studios and THQ. Despite the publisher's best attempts to broaden their publishing efforts in the late 2000s, THQ went down in history as the latest big publisher to fall behind the curve of the modern gaming world. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video on a game I wouldn't normally cover. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like and share it on your favorite social media sites. In the comments below, let me know your thoughts on Frontlines and if you ever thought it had a chance to become a more popular game. Be sure to subscribe to catch the next video as soon as it comes out. And as always, thanks for watching.